superficially, the Solomons is delicately poised between the two sides, between the Beijing side, Beijing, of course, being the one China that it switched recognition to from Taiwan a couple of years ago, and the rest of the Pacific Islands Forum Group, including Australia and New Zealand, plus the US. So while it's signed a security pact with Beijing, and while it's enjoying a range of other new engagements with Beijing, including Beijing's building of some 32 new or refurbished airfields across the Solomon Islands, at the same time, it's trying to keep up appearances, I would put it, with the other Pacific Islands Forum countries plus the US. But I would suggest that this is mainly a pretty superficial affair, and that Sogavare's personal and political interest is invested in the course that he seems set on, which is to postpone the election that he's facing, and with China's support, defy opposition demands to continue with the election, and perhaps turn to China for military and security assistance in pursuing that course.
You know, Solomon Islands is a good example of perhaps the fact that US trying to reset relations in this region may have been left a little too late.
Well, yes, and the US has admitted that. Kamala Harris, the vice president, in her comments to the leaders, said almost exactly that we realise that we haven't, really paid sufficient attention to our Pacific Islands friends. It's been more than 30 years since the Americans had an embassy there, for example, and then they're engaged in a scramble to create one now. So, yes, and Australia hasn't been as negligent, but it's also been a bit negligent about its Pacific Island relationships. Of course, the previous government's position on climate change was a big obstacle to improved relations, but we now seem to be able to get beyond that one at least.
It is interesting, and I'm fascinated to hear your observations about how this Albanese government appears to be trying to reset relations on a number of foreign policy fronts, and just the agreement to bring back all those Syrian migrants still or family members still living there in camps. Is that an indication that they are starting to tick off a couple of items that have just been left on the agenda?
Yes, I would definitely put that in the unfinished business category, where that's a problem that's been frozen in time for years now, and this government has said, well, let's just tidy it up. We're talking about fewer than 50 people, and although it's become contentious with the opposition already, it is really a pretty minor detail of unfinished business. But likewise, why did it take 5 years for Australia to accept New Zealand's offer to repatriate or to accept 50 refugees from Nauru a year? This is pretty basic unfinished business and tidying up where the coalition left off. So there is that sort of unfinished agenda, but they've also moved into a reconnection, I would put it, with a range of countries. Largely that has got to do with the climate change agenda, which was an obstacle in a lot of relationships. Anthony Albanese told me a couple of weeks ago that he said the government's embrace of climate change and the new climate change emissions target and the bills and all of that, he said its impact on our international standing cannot be underestimated. And it's reconnected Australia, for example, with the Pacific Islands, but it's also really stepped up Australia's engagement with the Biden administration in the US, and it's opened the way to a new trade agreement between Australia and the European Union, which was really blocked by Australia's climate change position. So that's been just in itself an important advance, really, in reconnecting Australia with a lot of its traditional friends, even as this government pursues things that the previous government, the coalition, had underway. So, for example, Albanese's picked up Morrison's commitment to AUKUS, and they're running hard with that, including the pursuit of hypersonic missiles, which is going to be pretty important in finally getting Australia a long-range strike capability, which it just does not have at the moment. as well as a range of other commitments that the Albanese government's just picked up pretty seamlessly.
Yeah. Is it the fact that a new government allows that reset? Of course, the AUKUS deal enraged France, but there again we see a reset of relations, if you will, with the French, trying to move forward beyond this.
Yes, so the two big ones, I think that's one that you've touched on, is the French. It was really pretty effortless for Albanese simply because he wasn't Morrison to reconnect Australia with France. And so part of that, well, it's an important country, France, because apart from anything else, they're a major and permanent Pacific country with a lot of Pacific interests, and that will be important in the years to come in defending Australian and Western interests against Chinese destabilisation. So that's important, and Macron's apparently going to come to Australia next month as part of that, and everybody's friendly again. And so he's accelerating now the EU, a larger EU reconnection with Australia too, and through the trade deal, for instance. And the second big one being, of course, China, which is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And you wouldn't really call it, well, the government calls it a stabilisation. Penny Wong, Anthony Albanese say that they are pursuing the stabilisation of relations with China. And the new government really gave the Chinese government an opportunity to say, okay, a fresh set of faces and less hostile people on the other side, so we can give them a new chance. I would suggest that stabilisation is just a temporary expedient because China's entire foreign policy and the Chinese dream, as Xi Jinping calls it, is based on a reset and a recreation of the entire world order. So Australia can't really stabilise what is inherently unstable, but it has given the government an opportunity to put down, both governments, Chinese and Australian, to put down their rhetorical weapons, at least in the short run.
Yeah, always good to get your thoughts, Peter. Thanks.
Pleasure, Bill.